Hey, people. It's a sleepy reader tonight, but I want to give you some of my comic book thoughts. I'm going to do a countdown of the 5 comic books that I got from this past week, from New Comic Book Day, and then also give you thoughts on a few other things I've been reading in the past few days. But I won't put those in the countdown because I thought about it, but it just doesn't seem like they fold in well. So anyway, coming in at number 5, my least favorite comic book of this past New Comic Book Week was She Said Destroy. I love the title. I love this homage cover to Fiona Staples. It's not by Fiona Staples. At first, when I picked it up at the store, I thought, whoa, maybe Fiona Staples did a variant cover for it. But it's a very convincing homage to one of her saga covers. Inside is a story that had okay art, very, very simple looking art, but so I didn't really have a problem with that. But the writing, the plotting, the characterization, I just couldn't make heads or tails of it really, other than the caption blurbs on the first page that explained the basic idea of two gods at war with each other. I vaguely understood that we were looking at the followers of those two gods, or perhaps of just one of those gods, and maybe they were getting prepared or in some phase of their conflict, but nothing registered. It was like a writer who left all the important stuff off the page and thought the reader could follow along, but this reader couldn't. So I will not be getting She Said Destroy. I feel like I kind of wasted my time and money on that one. All the rest of the comic books I had fun reading, including my number 4, Batman Detective Comics. Kind of a solid annual, working the way maybe an annual should be working. It's a little to the side of the current Detective Comics story arc, but it's putting in place stuff that we can see will come up again probably in future arcs in the main sequence of Detective Comics. But I felt a little tired of the feeling of Batman is always being put under a microscope and deconstructed by writers these days. So it's not a real deconstruction, but it's yet another story where there's kind of a Batman analog that he has to fight against, someone that is kind of a dark reflection of him. And in this case, kind of a dark reflection of the old Batman Incorporated too. It was a well-told tale, and it had kind of an ending, but also left open more stories dealing with this guy, the Reaper. I think that's what he's called. And I feel like I read some Reaper stories. Was he a character in the 90s in Batman? Now I'm not totally positive. Or did he show up in some Dark Knight, Tales of the Dark Knight or something like that? So yeah, not a whole lot to say about it. It did give me pause and make me think maybe I've just read too much Batman and I need a long break from Batman. But you'll see later that's not entirely true. And speaking of kind of deconstructing things, this is a super deconstructive comic. Peter Cannon Thunderbolt. It is the finale of Kieran Gillen's story, which kind of started out as beginning right after the end of Watchmen, but then twisted kind of cleverly in the first 4 issues into a deconstruction or a new kind of using deconstruction of comics as a way to travel between universes in a sense. And by this final issue, Peter Cannon, I guess, has become on some level, as he battled an evil version of himself from another universe, aware of that sense of story. And it's almost as if it's just the writer of comics talking to himself after a while, saying we should stop telling the same story we've been telling for 30 years and repeating the pattern and not growing and changing. Now, obviously, I think there are plenty of writers out there who have grown and changed, and Kieran himself has probably transcended in other comics the Alan Moore project of Watchmen a long time ago, but maybe he doesn't feel that way. But it's kind of like a call to arms later in the comic book about the dangers of unrelenting deconstruction. Deconstruction kills the bad guy, I guess, if you can call that deconstruction. It's ironic because this is a comic of unrelenting deconstruction, kind of obsessed with that 9-panel grid, famous from Watchmen, but not invented by Watchmen, very common in a lot of Steve Ditko comics, for instance. But an obsession with that 9-panel grid. The crazy thing is page number 1 is a redrawing or reimagining of page number 5 of Watchmen number 1. Let me see if I can show you. There's the original Watchmen. And there is Gillen and Wingard's take on it. It's not exactly the same, but it's got a lot of the same stuff going on. And then page number 2 is page number 6 of Watchmen. There's Watchmen there. There's page number 6. And Peter Cannon's page number 2. That's pretty intense. But what's the purpose of that? I can't really tell you. I just didn't. While I understood the larger message here of let's move on beyond deconstruction, let's move on to a new kind of positive story that's different from what we had in Watchmen, I didn't feel like I had a story that earned all that or that really told me all that within the story. It just had to be inserted, in a sense, by the narrator, who Peter Cannon became the narrator, I guess, or the writer in some way. And I guess for Kieran Gillen, who I believe is a gay man, this gay kiss between two of the heroes and the breaking of the 9-panel grid is the moment of freedom, I guess. And then they kind of walk off into the deconstructed panel instead of the sunset. I'm not sure. So anyway, it would have ranked higher if it gelled a little more in this final issue. Be interesting to see what some people have to say when they read it all in one trade. I think it will be a trade very worth reading if you're into things like Watchmen and, kind of deconstruction of comics in a way, or playing with the idea that the characters are in a comic. Is it deconstruction when the characters know they're in a novel, or is that something else? So in this, these are characters who almost seem to know they're in a comic book. Totally not knowing that they're in the comic book, all the characters in the Hulk. This came in at number 4 for me, so my most favorite comic this week. I don't think I enjoyed it as much as Hulk number 17, partially because I didn't get that into this version of the Abomination. Let me see if I can find a big picture. It was cool to see this old version of a monster that Betty Ross became. I remember this creature from the 70s, the Harpy, I think. And I assume she's appeared in earlier issues of Immortal Hulk. You have to remember I started with issue 17. But this issue just didn't have as much impact as issue 17. And although there was some gross stuff about the Abomination, I was not as enthralled by this version of the Abomination. And nor was I surprised that much by the big reveal of who the Abomination was by the end of the comic. I think I've seen that person be the Abomination before. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago. So still a very good comic, kind of a sense of it moving. The plot is moving along more than this is a big impact issue. You may notice quite the smudge on the cover, which I don't think was there when I bought it, unless I just wasn't paying much attention at all. I think it's from my own fingers when I read it before going to bed. I pulled it out of the plastic bag that it was in. I read it, and then I put it beside my bed without putting it back in the plastic bag. And when I woke up in the morning, I noticed these smudges, and I also noticed that there was a lot of, color breaks or whatever, little, I don't think you can see it there. And, I've heard people complain about and you can see some lines, maybe from the printer rollers or something, going through the cover. I've heard people have often complained about the low quality of Marvel Comics, their covers, and the ink coming off and stuff. And I've experienced that a little bit, but this was the most extreme. I've always noticed how flimsy the Marvel comics are and what poor cover stock they have. So anyway, I don't know if I should try and see what happens if I rub at that. Would more ink come off, or is that somehow my fingerprints will come off? I don't know. In at number 1 was, for me this week, a little bit to my surprise, was Batman Last Night on Earth. I think this, Scott Snyder's version of Batman eventually grew a little bit too wacky for me, and too much magic technology, so to speak. And this grows out of that magic technology, a future that for Batman that Scott Snyder already imagined, where Bruce Wayne had set up this cloning machine and downloaded his memories every week or something like that. And then if he were to die, the clone would get his memories, and a new, young, strong, cloned Batman would pop out of the machine and be ready to keep fighting. And Snyder imagined generations of these clones fighting on in Gotham. And in this book, one of those clones wakes up to a kind of wasteland of the world, and wackiness ensues. I guess I'm not going to try to give away too much, but there's all kinds of crazy scenes. There's the Joker's head in a jar, and the Joker delivers all the best kind of ironic, silly lines, and it's a lot like Headlopper, the witch, the head of the witch that Headlopper carries around, who makes wisecracks and odd comments. There's a definite influence there of that. But I just enjoyed the way the story unfolded. The art, of course, which was stunning and creepy and disturbing, by Greg Capullo. So, and this is 3 issues. And even though it's kind of what I was complaining about. It was yet another way of putting Batman under the microscope and saying, what is Batman really all about? What's the purpose of Batman? What's the core of Batman? The nuttiness of Batman. But it was done so well and with so much nuttiness that it became the book I had gave me the most pleasure of these 5 books that I read. So, continuing on the vein of pleasure, I, under the influence of Ryan and his, what is Ryan's last name? And what is the name of his? I'm going to put a link to his website down below where he talks about and reviews on a blog a lot of more arty comics and occasionally mainstream comics, but usually arty comics. And when I saw the pages of this one, Motel Universe, I just couldn't resist. And I looked it up on Amazon. It was quite affordable. $21.95 for a hardcover is the list price, and I think there was a good discount on Amazon. And it's a real nice package, well bound and everything, and has this crazy fun art. Very colorful, very wacky. Reminded me a bit of, what's his name, Hanks. Now I can't remember his first name. That crazy artist from the Golden Age. A little like a cross between him and Linda Barry or something like that. And this tells a crazy story about a science fictional world where there are these creatures, the skins, that rich, decadent people love to hunt for their valuable skin, and these aliens called the Jeffs, who are basically anthropomorphized dogs, and every single one of them is named Jeff, capture the skins and then Other rich aliens pay them, and maybe some of them are humans, pay them a lot of money to hunt the skins. Kind of depressing and grim. But then it gets really silly, and it takes a sudden turn where someone who's obviously a Donald Trump, not Donald Trump as president, but Donald Trump as real estate developer, shows up. I think his name is someone Flump. There he is. And he builds a hotel and makes the skins slaves who work in the hotel. So it's a story that sometimes comes into coherence and then goes out of coherence again. And some people may dig that more than I did. But I still am very glad I got the book and enjoy just all the weirdness. I wish that the lettering were done better. I suppose, the argument would be the lettering is part of the indiness of it. But there were times where it just felt like the artist couldn't be bothered to figure out how to fit the word balloon into the picture, so just sort of squished it in, and I don't know. The lettering irritated me, and the sense that there could have been more of a story here. I guess the average person buying this is supposedly wanting an art comic, and the story doesn't matter, but this almost cohered into a story that I could really enjoy, but then would fall apart again. But in some way, so it's kind of a book I loved and was being frustrated by at the same time. It's called Motel Universe. I'm not sure if I said that. And the author is not listed on the cover. Drescher is his last name. Joachim Drescher, I guess, is his name. I don't know if Secret Acres is a publisher that publishes other books, or this is the only book they've ever published. I don't know. I've never heard of them before. I also caught up finally on my Gunning for the Hits reading, and at this point I kind of feel like it's kind of a melodrama based on fictionalized view of the record industry in the late 80s when CDs were booming and people were making a lot of money re-releasing albums on CDs. And it adds in the idea that there's this guy who used to be kind of a soldier of fortune / hitman who's now a record executive. So every once in a while he uses his willingness to go point guns in people's faces to help him with his record deals. But as we hit issue 5, things may be falling apart for him in interesting ways. It's not, I like it a lot, but I don't know how many other people would, so I don't want to run around and tell everyone to get it. But if you have kind of old-time fascination with music, and you're willing to swallow this kind of mix of some possibly documentary information about the music industry combined with some seemingly very wild fictional stuff, it's a lot of fun. But it is kind of melodramatic, as I said. But I'm enjoying it a lot. And it has good back matter, which also tends to convince you that it's drawn from real life to a degree, because the writer used to work at Ryko Records, I believe, and had some other positions in the music industry. So yeah, I'm very glad that I continued to read that. And then I, in the past 2 days, read 2 Jimmy Olsen. No, one is Superman. And one was that's Jimmy Olsen there. And the other one was the Superman. So the Superman one, these are from, I think they're both from 1965. The Superman one is a imaginary story where Lex Luthor is Superman's adopted brother. They both end up getting adopted by the Kents eventually. And then Pete Ross, in his jealousy of Lana Lang being in love with Superman, becomes kind of the Lex Luthor character. The art is beautiful. I'm not quite sure who the artist is, actually. Pete Ross steals inventions from the Fortress of Solitude and uses them against Superman. So he uses Kryptonian adventures against him. And Superman ends up marrying Lois Lane. Anyway, it's a wild ride. They pack so much into these issues. So I really enjoyed that. And maybe my favorite read of the week, it's hard to really compare that to a Scott Snyder Batman comic, but was this really crazy issue of Jimmy Olsen, which starts on an alien planet where they have some kind of problem, and they wake up from cold freeze. They're three wisest men, and they plug those three guys into a computer, and the computers and the three wise men all sort of think together, and then on the screen the solution to their problem appears. It's not Batman or Superman or Supergirl, it's Jimmy Olsen. They must get Jimmy Olsen. And so then the emperor of this planet interviews three different spies to decide who shall go to Earth to get Jimmy Olsen. There's the strong man, there's the expert in chemistry, and then there's the woman who spies by, and I think her name is Galora, and she spies by seducing men and controlling them all. And I guess these are these trophies, or are these actually men who have statues of the many suitors who have died dueling for my love? So then she flies in a spaceship to Earth and arranges to have Jimmy rescue her from her crashed spaceship, and has him brush his hair with a special Dynacomb, which gives him super strength. And so then he can, quote, rescue her with his strength. There he is carrying her spaceship around. And so what does he do with his super strength? He goes to one of these challenges where, who can stay in the ring for one round with our boxer. What's his name? What's the boxer's name? It's at a charity sports event, but clearly they don't want anybody to give money to charity. The sports promoters don't. But so he goes up against this boxer named Kid Steele. And because of the Dynacomb, he easily defeats the boxer with one punch after being invulnerable to all the boxer's punches. So then they send in a professional wrestler, and he defeats the professional wrestler. And then they send in a Viking guy. I guess he's also a professional wrestler, and he smashes the Viking. And all of these people they send against him are cheating, like using brass knuckles or having magnets and electrical tasers in their outfits and stuff. But they can't stop Jimmy because he's got his... and then they send in three wrestlers who dress as cavemen with clubs, and he defeats all of them. So the sports promoter's all upset. He gets $5,000 that he can give to charity, even though the whole event is supposed to be a charity sports event. And then he and Galora drive off, and she's kind of begging him to just let him spend time alone with her. But he wants, baby. He calls her baby and doll and things like that, and he's got to get to work. And then there's a crime. And instead of Superman solving it, Dyna Jimmy solves it, and he proves to Perry White that he has super strength by lifting Superman over his head with one arm. Finally, Galora's been telling Jimmy that he's like the most popular person on her planet. They've been watching his adventures from her planet, and he's got a big fan club. And she convinces him he needs to come to her planet to be a member to meet all the fans and that kind of thing, and be adored. And finally he agrees. And when they head out, you can see there's her spaceship, and there's Jimmy. He's put on one of his costumes from his collection of costumes to fly to her planet. There's this cool scene where they warp space so they can fly faster than light. I like it that they're actually explaining that. Although this comic is still full of the kind of stuff where they really have the difference between a galaxy and a solar system totally confused. He gets to their planet and has some experiences eating luscious food, but then he goes into a room and discovers all these statues to his heroic death. And he says, wait a minute, why do you have all these statues for me being dead? And they're saying, oh, his reaction factors are perfect. They're monitoring him in a lab. Sorry I'm going this blow by blow, but I just thought it was so crazy and how to convey the craziness of all the stuff going on. And so when he complains about all these statues to his death, she says it's a Mordian. Oh, the name of her planet is Mord. It's a Mordium custom. We honor our heroes before they make the supreme sacrifice. So for some reason, they want him to think he's going to die. And then they do this brain test on him here. And what do they say about the results of the brain test? Jimmy, you're taking it so nobly. Before you go into combat, this brain probe will record your last will and testament on film. Oh, right. Okay, so that's what that's about. And then they show, these silly things. He's going to leave his Jimmy Olsen robot to his girlfriend, Lucy Lane. He's going to his fan club. He's going to leave his costume collection. I guess he's a big cosplayer. And to Superman, he's going to leave his picture album with kind of a scrapbook of their adventures. And then they show him this space sarcophagus that they'll bury his body in. But they tell him, someday in the future we may be able to revive you. You can choose any of these treasures to put in your tomb with you. And so he chooses a bunch. The choices include jewels, gold, power jewels, emeralds, and diamonds. And he chooses a bunch of diamonds, which they say that's the final test. He's proved that he's the right person for the job. So then they reveal what the job is, which is to be the champ. I guess I went on too long, so the iPad shut me down, but I'm going to keep going. So Jimmy Olsen finds out he has to have a battle with the other set of aliens, because their general, who looks exactly like Jimmy Olsen, had all the bones in his body broken, and it's going to take a month to heal him. So they needed someone who looked just like Jimmy Olsen to be in the fight. But then it turns out the fight is a thing where you're in a spaceship and you wear a helmet, and that helmet projects whatever you're thinking onto this asteroid, and the creatures you think up have to battle the creatures thought up by the enemy. So where's all the death? Jimmy, you're about to die, and what was the point of all that? So Jimmy can't defeat the other alien's champion, who comes up with a creature who defeats all of the things Jimmy imagines. Jimmy imagines Hercules and King Arthur and Perseus, from Greek myth, Perseus, and then Superman. And they're all defeated by the things imagined by the alien from the planet, like Clum or something. And he comes back to planet Mord, all rejected. I lost. I'm a loser. But they throw a parade for him. Yay, you did exactly what we expected you to do. And the other aliens that were going to attack them, decide not to invade their planet. They say, Mordians, we planned to conquer you because we thought your advanced civilization might menace us. But if Vinar, that's who Jimmy Olsen is pretending to be, is your greatest general, we have nothing to fear. We'll leave your weak-brained people in peace. And so then there's a long sequence of where they describe to Jimmy all the dumb things he did and how it proved how foolish he was. For instance, diamonds have no value except to be shiny and good for cutting things. So obviously he was dumb there. Here's all these other lookalikes of Jimmy Olsen / General Vinar, who were just too smart to send against, from their own planet, from planet Mord, to send against the alien clones. And so anyway, they review all the ways Jimmy Olsen is just too dumb, but that makes him their great hero. He saved their planet by being dumb, and they give him all these awards. At the end, Superman comes up to Jimmy and says, Jimmy, I heard all about your journey to Mord. You must have been quite a hero there. How did you win that chest full of diamond medals? Modesty forbids me to say, Superman, says Jimmy. And then in the final panel, Jimmy thinks, How can I tell him that the sparklers are my reward for being the dumbest guy in the world of Mord, that is. The end. So, I don't know. This just takes the cake. The Silver Age was gold. I mean, the only thing I wish is, this was drawn by Jack Kirby. Then we really would have had amazing visuals to go with all this. The visuals were not bad at all. I don't know who the artist was. There is some great art in these old books, in my opinion. Stuff that I did not appreciate so much in my youth. Although in 1965 I was not reading DC Comics, but when I would see reprints and the like, or the 1970s similar versions to these things. In the 1970s, they weren't as way out wacky, though. Okay, I've now done my requisite overly long video, and I better go to bed. Talk to you all later. Bye-bye.